Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari-chan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of The Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish, also known as 残疾暴君的掌心鱼宠 by Xue Shan Fei Hu. The goal today is to cover chapters 127 through 130. So I hope you all enjoy, and let's get started, shall we? Chapter 127 Fishy Daughter Pregnancy. Liu questioned the system, wanting to know what childbirth was like in human form. It would definitely be different from when he was a fish. He'd shoved pillows into his clothes before, but pretending was definitely different from the real thing. He was also afraid that he'd have 4 daughters all at once. Sob. If that really happened, would his body still function properly? The system was quite detailed when it explained the missions around giving birth, most likely because it knew that the user was a bit unreliable at times. The system told him in no uncertain terms that in human form, he could only give birth to 1 child per pregnancy. Liu's heart, which felt about to explode out of his chest, finally settled back down. If it was only 1, he had the courage to try it. And there were advantages to the human form, too. Now that they were back in the capital under the emperor's nose, it was less risky than the fish form was, even though doing it as a fish was more convenient and painless. Though Prince Ting had assured him that he would make all the preparations, it would be a disaster if the emperor found out. Prince Ting and the 4 children would be implicated, too. If he was in human form, though, he was the only one who'd have to suffer a bit, and Prince Ting and the children would be safe. It would also reinforce the lies they had told back on the western border. That's that then, Liu thought to himself righteously. The system gave him a rundown of common pregnancy facts he should know for this time. It wasn't very different from a normal human pregnancy. The system told him that when the child was born, she would be a normal baby who wouldn't turn into a fish, and she wouldn't need to complete missions as a human baby to turn into a young fish like her brothers had. Though Liu would suffer a little more, there was no extra danger posed to the child, which was another reason why Liu was willing to give it a try. He'd confirmed with the system that he was pregnant with a daughter, but since it took human pregnancies about 3 months to start showing, Liu wasn't in any rush. He felt bad that he'd hidden his pregnancy from Prince Ting the last time, since he was the other father. He definitely wouldn't hide anything from him this time around, he decided. As for the emperor, they'd inform him once he was further along. Prince Ting was now the only D-Prince who the emperor valued, and too many people were targeting them, to the point that they were suffering from poison and assassination attempts. If he announced the pregnancy too early, Liu was afraid that someone would go after his unborn child. He'd transmigrated into a palace novel, after all, and he didn't want to make any mistakes. Liu told Prince Ting about his pregnancy first. Back when Prince Ting learned that he was pregnant with fish eggs, he'd become dizzy. Now, as he learned Liu was pregnant with a daughter and would give birth to her in human form, he almost drowned in happiness. But he sensed that something was wrong. Xiaoyu, you... Prince Ting's inquiring eyes fell on Liu's flat stomach. If this pregnancy was to take place in human form, wouldn't he have to go through pain of childbirth? Liu understood his gaze and nodded. Prince Ting paused, realizing what a sacrifice this would be. He gripped Liu's hand tightly. Liu was willing to endure the pain of childbirth, even though he could easily lay eggs in fish form. Prince Ting was moved. He knew very well who this was for. He decided that this would be the only time he would ever let Xiaoyu suffer like this, at least before he took over the empire. Afterward, he would help Xiaoyu hatch as many little fish as he wanted. I won't let you suffer again, he promised. Liu gazed at Prince Ting with reddened eyes, touched by his sincerity. With this promise, the pain didn't seem like such a big deal anymore. Previously, when they were at the western border, Prince Ting had him pretend to be pregnant and waited on him as if he really was. He was better informed about pregnancy than Li Yu was, and when he learned Li Yu was pregnant this time, he immediately found a servant who was skilled in obstetrics to check Li Yu's pulse at the same time each day. Their daughter was still too small to reveal to anyone else, but there were some things they had to avoid due to the pregnancy. Other than taking Li Yu's pulse, Prince Sing also gave Li Yu additional servants to take care of him and ordered them to follow him at all times to make sure Li Yu didn't get hurt. Li Yu was afraid the children might let it slip if he let them know too early, so he decided not to tell them yet. But although he used to pick them up quite often, recently it had become difficult. Even so, Fish Dad didn't shower them with any less love. He would still often play with them, tell them stories, and teach them the principles of being a human. He'd heard that one had to take care of the older children's emotions when having another pregnancy. Li Yu was afraid that the children would feel anxious, but so far they seemed fine. Li Yu had once probingly asked what they thought about him and Daddy Prince Sing giving them a younger sister. All 4 pairs of eyes lit up as they remembered the little girl at Uncle Ye's banquet. "What little sister?" The children were delighted. Li Yu let out a sigh of relief. He could only have one child at a time in human form, but at the rate he and Prince Sing were going, there would probably be more younger brothers and sisters popping out in the future. As Li Yu began his pregnancy journey, Prince Sing started an investigation into the assassin at Jingtai Hall, and they both waited for news from the emperor. Prince Sing had looked into these assassins before, but because he'd been looking in the wrong direction, he came up empty-handed. This time, with Li Yu's reminder, he realized that whoever was behind the assassin could very well be the same person who'd poisoned him. They'd already hypothesized that the Xue had come from Lolan, so Prince Sing started reading ancient books about Lolan. In one of them, called The History of Lolan, he found a suspicious record. The people of Lolan were skilled at fighting and poisons. Their battles often left their opponents without bodies to bury. This book didn't mention the specific method they used, but the way it was described definitely brought to mind the corpse-melting liquid. Li Yu was the one who'd come up with the name corpse-melting liquid. Prince Sing started using it himself because he thought it fit. This particular clue made Prince Sing more inclined to believe Li Yu's hypothesis. It seemed very likely that the same person was behind everything. The history of Lolan also recorded the life of Changle, the last king of Lolan. The 2 countries had become hostile after this Changle had angered the emperor. Although the Lolan people were good at fighting, they were still a small country and couldn't withstand the iron cavalry of the empire. Even so, Changle stubbornly resisted and held on until the end, when he was captured alive by the greatest general of the empire and taken to the capital. The emperor was young and full of vigor back then, and wasn't merciful to prisoners. To keep his life, Changle had no choice but to give up his daughter as an imperial consort in exchange for his freedom. Li Yu was reading The History of Lolan with Prince Sing, saying it was prenatal education for their daughter. Prince Sing spoiled him and let him do whatever he wanted. If Li Yu got tired, Prince Sing let him sleep on him. Frankly, their little daughter was only a few days old, not even a ball in her daddy's tummy, so all the prenatal education was going to Fish Dad himself. The history of Lolan was full of twists and turns, and for once, Li Yu didn't fall asleep as they read. He read all the following records as well and even found a brush to make notes. The emperor once had a foreign imperial consort, but there was no such person who fit the bill in the harem now. What did that mean? If a consort disappeared, then either she had died or she was thrown out. Li Yu remembered that the emperor had seemed to be deep in thought when he mentioned foreigners. If all of this had to do with the destroyed Lolan, did the emperor perhaps remember the imperial consort from Lolan? But he hadn't said anything about it. Head Eunuch Luo would have the answers about the emperor's consorts that they needed, but he was away investigating Puliu's death and looking for witnesses, and he hadn't returned to the palace yet. At first, Li Yu thought he'd just wait to learn new clues from head eunuch Luo whenever he returned, and if he couldn't wait, he could ask someone else. Prince Ting lifted his head, his eyes flashing. There were unknown forces in the palace, so they had to find the truth as soon as possible. The enemy might have already realized that they'd been discovered when their assassin never returned. This enemy was more difficult than all the other princes put together, and they didn't know what their next move might be. Late that night, Prince Ting's guards, on his order, brought back a dark cloth bag with someone inside, a blindfolded woman. Prince Ting ordered Wang Xi to remove the blindfold. The woman was wearing shabby palace clothes. She squinted uncomfortably in the sudden light, but as soon as she realized Prince Ting was in front of her, she seemed surprised and sneered at him. "What did you bring me here for?" she demanded, glaring at him. Li Yu, protected by Prince Ting, was a little further away. When he saw the woman's face and her aura, he thought she seemed familiar, but he couldn't put a finger on it. That was until a meow came from the bag and a cat tumbled out. The guard wasn't sure how the cat got in there. Looking at this cat with fur so dirty one couldn't tell its original color, and the faded haitong flowers embroidered on the woman's handkerchief, Li Yu suddenly came to a realization. This was Lady Chu, the consort who had once wanted to drink 1,000 carp soup. And this cat was Piao Xue, the enemy Li Yu met right when he transmigrated into the book. Wasn't Lady Chu in the Cold Palace? Why did Prince Ting order his people to sneak her out of there? Li Yu nudged Prince Ting's arm to let him know he was confused. Prince Ting couldn't let outsiders find out about his new ability to speak, so he ordered Wang Xi to interrogate her for him. "Lady Chu," Wang Xi said, "His Highness has something to ask you. Be smart and answer whatever he asks. Don't think of playing any tricks. If His Highness can sneak you out without anyone noticing, he can send you back without anyone noticing too, in a body bag." Lady Chu hated Prince Ting from the bottom of her heart. She wanted to ignore him, but since her life was in his hands, she had no other choice. "What do you want to know?" she said, still glaring at him fiercely. Prince Ting glanced at Wang Xi, who said, "About one of the Emperor's consorts from Lolan." Lady Chu paused and smiled, delighted. "Dead for a long time. Why are you asking about her?" "Just answer the question," snapped Wang Xi. "Cut the chit-chat." Prince Ting's thought was that aside from head eunuch Luo, the older concubines who'd been with the Emperor for much longer would also know about the consort from Lolan. Lady Chu was the perfect choice. She had been deposed by the Emperor and banished to the Cold Palace, so he could use specific methods to meet with her that wouldn't work on any other consort. "You're talking about Consort Mei?" If Prince Ting had asked about anything else, Lady Chu might not have been able to answer, but she at least knew of this person. The history of Lolan only recorded the fact that Changan had presented his daughter to the Emperor. Afterward, all it said was that she was beautiful and elegant. When she entered the palace, the Emperor had rewarded her with the title of Consort Mei. Li Yu's eyes lit up. Mei meant plum, and the assassins had plum blossoms on their sword hilts. Was this a coincidence? It seemed that the Emperor was very fond of this Consort Mei, since he rarely gave titles to his concubines. Even Lady Chu, at her most favored, had never been given a title. But Consort Mei didn't feel the same. She was handed over to the Emperor by her father, Changan, and she didn't want to enter the palace. 3 days after she joined the harem, she tried to assassinate the Emperor and was sentenced to death. From then on, the Emperor felt that it was dangerous to take on concubines who might not be loyal, so he never accepted another foreign concubine. He was also furious with Changan. The king had originally been demoted until he didn't even have a title anymore, but because of Consort Mei, the entire Lolan royal family became slaves. Consort Mei's story was short, complete in just a few sentences. Lady Chu stayed where she was when she finished. Prince Ting ordered the guards to take her back to the Cold Palace. She gritted her teeth and knelt down. "I've told you everything I know. Can you do me a favor?" Prince Ting looked at her, waiting for her to speak. Li Yu thought she was going to ask Prince Ting to get her out of the cold palace permanently. After all, life was difficult there. But instead, Lady Chu pointed to Piao Xue. "You can do what you want with this cat," she whispered. "I don't want it anymore." Li Yu and Prince Ting stared at her. With that, she got into the bag on her own. It seemed like her cat intended to follow her, but she started yelling at it before it could climb in. Piao Xue seemed to be used to being scolded. After a couple of sentences from Lady Chu, it didn't dare move anymore. When it finally looked up, its owner had disappeared. Piao Xue waited, crying miserably, but Lady Chu never looked back. What were they going to do with the cat? Piao Xue had caught Li Yu once, when he was a fish. He had just transmigrated, so he was pretty confused at the time, and since the fish and cats were natural enemies, he didn't have a great impression of the cat. If it was some other kind of small animal, he might be able to keep it to raise. What did Lady Chu want them to do? "Tianchi, can I—" In the end, Piao Xue was just a cat. It hadn't done anything wrong. Li Yu hesitated a bit before making his decision. Piao Xue had offended Prince Ting before, too. Would he agree? Chapter 128. Fish Helps Chu's Cat. Prince Ting seemed to know what Li Yu was going to ask and surprisingly shook his head at him, his gaze falling onto Li Yu's stomach. Li Yu immediately knew what he meant. He was worried that it would be inconvenient since Li Yu was pregnant. Li Yu didn't know if he should laugh or cry. "I'm not going to raise it. I just want to find it a good home." Though Lady Chu had scolded the cat fiercely, Li Yu could tell that she still loved it. The cat had been in the bag with her the entire time the guards carried it over. If she really didn't want it, why would she do all this just to leave it at Prince Ting's manor? She'd even knelt in front of Prince Ting for her cat. Though she cursed at it a lot, she was actually helping it escape. It must have been living with her in the cold palace since she was deposed. Lady Chu, who was once flattered and sought after by many, now only had a cat by her side. Flattery when everything was going well could not compare to the company kept when one hit rock bottom. It was unexpected that the once cold, aloof, noble consort would lower her head for the sake of a cat. Li Yu judged the case in isolation. It wasn't a matter of principle. Just like Lady Chu said, she'd answered Prince Ting's questions and thus hoped Prince Ting could help her. It was a simple exchange. Prince Ting had originally refused because he was afraid that Li Yu and the unborn child would be in danger. But if Li Yu wasn't going to raise the cat himself, he had no reason to object. With his mind made up, Li Yu asked Wang Xi to note down which families were a good fit for the cat. This wasn't a hard task at all, and Wang Xi quickly found a good family that was well off and willing to raise a cat. Piao Xue definitely wouldn't go hungry there, so it ought to be a pretty good place for it. Wang Xi quickly took the cat over. Li Yu even had him bring a couple of things the cat might like too, worried that Piao Xue would throw a tantrum at being given away so suddenly. Everything was fine at first, but the next day, the family came to tell them that the cat had disappeared in the middle of the night. Li Yu froze. What were they going to do about this? He'd messed up things somehow by trying to help out. Since he was the one who'd asked Wang Xi to find the cat a home, he couldn't just ignore it. Li Yu hesitated for a moment before asking Wang Xi to look for Piao Xue. A couple of days passed, and Wang Xi didn't find the cat. Then, in the middle of the night, Li Yu was woken by a cat wailing outside his window. Prince Ting guided Li Yu outside, and they found Piao Xue in the yard, being chased around by Li Yu's pet ducks and rabbit. The pet ducks and rabbit weren't scared of the cat at all. Prince Ting intervened and separated the animals, pulling Piao Xue to the side. The cat was dirtier than it had been a couple of days ago, and when it saw Prince Ting and Li Yu, it wailed more and more pitifully. Did the cat disappear to run back here? Li Yu wondered. But the cat didn't even know them that well, so why would it come to look for them? Piao Xue kept meowing. Wang Xi gave it some food, and Piao Xue ran over, sniffed it, licked it, walked away, and kept meowing. What was up with this cat? Li Yu was confused. He didn't understand what the cat wanted, but as a pet, Li Yu grinned. He was a pet too. If his owner gave him to someone else, he would be unhappy, and even more than that, he would want to look for his owner. So, Piao Xue probably wanted to return to Lady Chu. Since it had been taken out of the cold palace in a bag, Piao Xue didn't know the way back. Had it come back to Prince Sing's manor because it was the only place it knew, and it was hoping they would bring it home? Li Yu turned to Prince Sing. Tianchi, can you help me with something? Prince Sing guessed what he was thinking and smiled. No need to ask. My people are yours. Li Yu nodded, beaming. He ordered the guard who'd brought Lady Chu over to send the cat back to her. He and Lady Chu were both wrong to assume that Piao Xue would be happier after leaving the difficult conditions in the cold palace. Perhaps to Piao Xue, a gold or silver bed could never compare to a bed next to its owner. Even Li Yu himself thought Prince Sing was his home. It was the same logic. Piao Xue seemed to understand when Li Yu asked the guards to take it back. Its sapphire-like eyes shone brightly. Before they left, Wang Xi wanted to give the cat a bath and wipe it clean, but it broke free from Wang Gonggong and ran to a corner of the courtyard. It dug up something from the dirt there and ran over and dropped it at Li Yu's feet. Wang Xi picked it up. It was a small, dried fish. The corner of Li Yu's mouth twitched. Thanks a lot, I guess. Giving a fish dried fish. The guard had just left with Piao Xue when the system refreshed. User, sharing a country with the Tyrant is in progress. Please be prepared. Huh? What did sending Piao Xue away have to do with sharing the country? But the system obviously thought it was connected somehow, so maybe it would be revealed soon. He'd always assumed that the mission would only progress once Prince Sing ascended to the throne, but apparently that wasn't the case. The guard soon came back to tell Li Yu that Lady Chu was very happy to see her cat returned. Apparently, she had regretted her decision as soon as she returned to the cold palace, and she said that she would never send Piao Xue away again. Though Li Yu had made everyone do a bunch of pointless work for Piao Xue, the conclusion was unexpectedly satisfying. The guard also told Li Yu that the guards at the cold palace were, for some reason, much more lax than usual. Li Yu didn't quite understand the guard's words, but Prince Sing frowned a little. The cold palace was filled with people who'd been punished because they had fallen out of favor with the emperor. The guards there rarely changed, so why had they changed now? Prince Sing thought about it for a long time. In the end, he ordered Wang Xi to send a letter to the palace. This was unusual. Prince Sing had people in the palace, but he almost never contacted them. But even after a night had passed, there was no news from the palace. Even Li Yu felt like something was off. Had Prince Sing's people run into something unexpected? Prince Sing hadn't seen the emperor in a couple of days, so he entered the palace to ask to meet him. If there really were lowland forces in the palace, they would also pose a threat to the emperor. According to the rules, if he wanted to meet the emperor, he had to make a request. But before Wang Xi even managed to step out of the manor, the palace servant showed up. Your Highness Prince Sing, consort, the emperor has summoned you. The person who came to pass along the message was an unfamiliar servant. It would usually have been head eunuch Luo or one of the servants who worked under him. Wang Xi was very familiar with all of them. Hearing this message from a stranger instead put Wang Xi on guard, and he asked the servant some questions. The servant didn't like to speak, though, so after a few questions, he took out the edict and placed it in front of them. When Wang Xi saw the edict, complete with the seal, there was nothing he could say. The emperor had summoned both of them, but Prince Sing didn't want Li Yu to tire himself out, so he wanted to go in on his own and ask for forgiveness on Li Yu's behalf. But Li Yu held his arm. I rest all the time, so how could I be tired? He said, smiling. Don't worry. Just because he was pregnant didn't mean he couldn't walk anymore. He thought Prince Sing was being a little overprotective. Besides, the emperor's edict only required that they go to see him. By now, Li Yu had seen the emperor several times already and was quite familiar with the whole affair, so there was no need to disobey the emperor. Prince Sing was only a step away from the position of crown prince. It wouldn't be worth it now to do something that made the emperor unhappy, or anything else that might lead to criticism. Li Yu wore a "take me, I'm super sweet" expression, and Prince Sing laughed and agreed. But he still insisted on bringing several extra servants to take care of Li Yu. Li Yu suddenly remembered that Share the Country had been refreshed. Could this trip to the palace have something to do with Prince Sing ascending to the throne? Was it an important event? There were still hostile forces in the palace. Out of caution, Li Yu placed a couple of things in his inventory, including a sharp dagger. They got to the palace quickly, but the servant didn't take them directly to Qianqing Palace. Instead, he led them to Qianqiu Hall and had them wait inside. No sooner had they entered and sat down than several teams of guards came and surrounded the hall. "The emperor has been feeling unwell," the servant said apologetically. "These are the emperor's orders. Please forgive us, Your Highness. The other princes are in Qianqing Palace right now, and the emperor requests that you join them as soon as possible." Prince Sing and Li Yu glanced at each other, sensing something was wrong. The emperor had been in great health the last time they'd seen him. How had he become unwell in just a few days? And why hadn't the servant mentioned it before they left the manor? The emperor hadn't been sick around this time in the novel. No, the plot had changed long ago. Li Yu's heart was beating furiously. He stopped the servant to ask, "How is royal father feeling? Which imperial physician has seen him? What was the diagnosis?" The servant hesitated. "The emperor caught a chill at night, and it may be a cold. All of the imperial physicians are with him. Please rest assured, consort." The servant was quite unclear in his answers, and some details that should have been obvious were wrong. Head eunuch Luo would have never made this mistake. But not only was this servant incorrect, he had to be prompted before he would say anything. Li Yu had a bad feeling about this. Was there something to hide about the emperor being unwell? There were a lot of guards surrounding Qianqiu Hall, while a number of guards at the Cold Palace had decreased. Li Yu and Prince Sing couldn't help but glance at each other again. Li Yu could tell that Prince Sing thought it was suspicious too. The servants seemed to want to separate them. "I've already come to the palace," Li Yu said hesitantly. "Why don't I go with His Highness?" But the servant stopped him and said with a troubled expression, "The emperor summoned you to the palace, but he only asked His Highness to meet him at Qianqing Palace. You should wait here. Perhaps the emperor will summon you soon." The servant kept citing the emperor's orders, so it was difficult for Li Yu to oppose him. No matter what they were hiding, Prince Sing had to follow the emperor's orders and go. That was the only way to find out what was happening with the emperor. Prince Sing pulled Li Yu closer and straightened his slightly crooked collar. "Tianzhi," Li Yu said softly, wanting to remind Prince Sing to be safe. Prince Sing nodded and took Li Yu's hand. He quickly wrote "guard" in his palm to remind Li Yu that the guards would protect him. He'd already thought of everything Li Yu was afraid of or worried about. Prince Sing shook his hand again, as if he was waving goodbye. "Your Highness, wait," Li Yu said after a moment's thought. "Let me fix your collar first." The servant, who had been staring at them the entire time, thought this was a bit too sappy and turned his face away quietly. Li Yu quickly adjusted Prince Sing's collars and cuffs. He even crouched down to check his cloud-patterned boots. Prince Sing hadn't been expecting this. Surprised, he moved to help him up. But Li Yu shushed him silently with a finger. Under Prince Sing's gaze, he quickly tucked the dagger into his husband's boot. Chapter 129. Fish Becoming Smart. After Prince Sing left, Li Yu ordered the guards to stand guard in the hall so he could calmly go over recent events. Perhaps he'd felt a little bit calmer these days because the Sixth Prince was imprisoned, Prince Sing's muteness was cured, and he'd become pregnant with their daughter. Meanwhile, they were much closer to discovering the identities of the people behind Prince Sing's poisoning. Prince Sing was still in the middle of his investigation, so he hadn't had enough time to complete the preparations. Li Yu believed in Prince Sing's protagonist halo without thinking. He assumed that Prince Sing would definitely be able to overcome anything, even though none of this had been mentioned in the original novel. Thus, they'd been caught off guard by the enemy. Now that he thought about it, the emperor had begun to avoid them when they mentioned that the enemy could be related to Lolan. Could it be that right then the emperor had fallen under someone's control instead of simply starting to avoid them for his own reasons? When he'd mentioned that Xue grew on snowy mountains, it had been clear from the emperor's expression that he knew something. Head eunuch Luo had been gone for a long time as well. Li Yu had been careless. Perhaps he'd been captured too. Without Luo Zhisheng, the emperor was missing a layer of protection. Even though there were imperial guards around him, the enemy had hidden in the palace for so many years that if they decided to attack, the emperor could probably fall into their trap. No, he might have fallen into a trap already. Even the guards in the Cold Palace had changed. That meant the enemy might already be in control of the guards. They might even be able to use imperial edicts to summon people to the palace. The more Li Yu thought about it, the more he regretted it. Why hadn't he thought of this earlier? They didn't know the emperor's current status, and Prince Ting had gone to Tianting Palace. Please, let him be all right. Though Prince Ting would always come out safe according to the system's rules, Li Yu didn't want the emperor to come to any harm either. The emperor was one of the only people in this world who treated Prince Ting well. In the original novel, after the emperor was injured by the Sixth Prince, he remained bedridden for the rest of his life. Li Yu had thought that the Sixth Prince was the one behind everything, so he assumed that as long as Prince Ting defeated the Sixth Prince, the emperor would be fine. Who would have expected a hidden boss? Did this boss exist in the original novel? The answer was definitely yes. Prince Ting was mute in the original book, and Li Yu had seen Prince Ting's children speaking in the system. That wasn't a coincidence. Prince Ting in the novel must have been poisoned as well, by the same people. But why did the enemy fail to face Prince Ting in the book? Perhaps because, in the original book, the fight between Prince Ting and the Sixth Prince was fierce. The Sixth Prince's influence remained strong until Prince Ting bathed the court in blood. Whoever was behind his poisoning had always stayed hidden. Perhaps Prince Ting had accidentally wiped them out in the process. Or perhaps they were allied with the Sixth Prince and Prince Ting took them out in the assumption that they were one of his lackeys. But now Prince Ting had successfully defeated the Sixth Prince, who barely had any supporters anymore. And Prince Ting wasn't a tyrant either, and wouldn't bathe the palace in blood like he had in the novel. That was why this mysterious force had come to light. Were they going to do something to the emperor? Li Yu and Prince Ting had found out about Lolan and Consort Mei. Those people all had good reason to hold a grudge against the emperor. There were probably a lot of people involved, so how did they all stay concealed? Li Yu had previously hypothesized that the person who poisoned Prince Ting most likely had a high status. Those related to the royal family could be ruled out, as they lived outside the palace. It would have been impossible for them to detain the emperor in such a short amount of time. Then, within the palace, he thought of the consorts. Among the consorts, who could be related to Lolan or Consort Mei? Were they originally from Lolan, or did they have some other sort of past with Lolan or Consort Mei? The latter didn't seem likely. Consort Mei had been sentenced to death just a few days after entering the harem. Li Yu was still trying to think when the servant who'd separated him and Prince Ting came looking for him. "Consort, the young Shutsu won't stop crying in the imperial study room. Please come and help." Li Yu's heart skipped a beat. "When I left the manor, he was still there," he said, doing his best to calm down. "Why is he suddenly in the palace?" The servant smiled. "The emperor summoned him just a little bit later than you, consort." Predicting that Li Yu wouldn't believe him, the servant took out a silver bracelet. The guard next to Li Yu was one of Prince Ting's. He took the bracelet and handed it to Li Yu after making sure there was nothing wrong with it. Li Yu examined it closely. The bracelet was rounded, meant for a child's wrist, and there were no sharp engravings. There was a small etched fish symbol colored with gold powder on the inside of the bracelet. Dabao had been golden when he was a young fish. Li Yu was very familiar with the fish symbol on the inside of the bracelet. He'd drawn the shape himself, and Prince Ting had ordered someone to carve it in. This was no doubt Dabao's silver bracelet. Li Yu felt a chill creeping all the way up his body from his feet, and he could barely keep himself upright. Back at Prince Sing's manor, Wang Xi had been left to take care of the children while Prince Sing and the consort entered the palace. Wang Gonggong was very fond of the children and happy to play with them, even if he had to become a horse for the young masters to ride. Not long after Prince Sing and the consort left, someone else from the palace came, saying that the emperor had ordered the young Shurzi to the palace. It was common for the young Shurzi to enter the palace. When Wang Xi saw the servant had a token to enter and leave the palace, he busied himself with making tea while he ordered the other servants to pack up Dabao's belongings. But the servants said this was an urgent summon and that there was no need for Wang Xi to waste his time. Why would he call preparing the young master a waste? Wang Xi really didn't like how the servant spoke. When he went to pick up Dabao, Dabao caught a glimpse of a servant he'd never seen before and hid behind Wang Xi in fear and hugged his arm, whispering, "Dabao won't go." Wang Xi patted Dabao on the back comfortingly. "Be good, young master," the servant said, smiling. "The consort is waiting for you in the palace. I'll take you to see him right now." Dabao shook his head like a rattle. In the past, Grandpa Emperor always sent head eunuch Luo to pick Dabao up, or his two daddies would take him. Fish Dad told him that strangers who used his name to whisk the fish babies away would lock him up, not let him eat, and not let him see Fish Dad. "Dabao won't go." Dabao was stubborn. "Daddy said it's scary." The other children agreed. Subao, who was usually the most confused, didn't hesitate. "You're a bad guy." Looking embarrassed, the servant tried to convince Wang Xi instead. "His Highness and the consort aren't here, so I defer to the young masters," Wang Xi said coldly. "If the young Shurzi doesn't want to, then I will accept a future punishment." Realizing that even orders from the emperor were useless, the servant excused himself angrily, saying that he would ask for further instructions from the palace. Wang Xi comforted the children, his expression turning serious. All the recent visitors from the palace had been unfamiliar faces, so the oral edict may have been fake. How dare they pretend to be carrying out the emperor's will? Wang Xi was now worried about his two masters' safety. If the summons was fake, then was it possible that the edict was faked as well? Something must have happened in the palace. Wang Xi was concerned that the servant might come back with more people, so he made a bold decision to bring the children to the house of Changle and ask the former Duke of Changle for protection. The house of Changle had always helped Prince Sing when needed. When he learned that Wang Xi had brought the children, Ye Qinghuan came out himself to greet them and brought the children to see the former Duke of Changle. Wang Xi didn't dare embellish the story when faced with Ye Qian, so he simply recounted the visits from two separate rounds of servants and how Prince Sing and his consort entered the palace. Ye Qian, holding Arbao and Sanbao, was deep in thought for a long time. It sounded like something was definitely wrong. He had Ye Qinghuan go to find out more. Ye Qinghuan returned shortly and reported that the palace doors were all closed. The guards bluntly told him that the emperor had ordered no one to enter without his permission. It looked like something really had happened at the palace. Ye Qian didn't dare delay any longer. He ordered the Duke of Changle to follow him to Prince Li's manor. Though the emperor wasn't letting anyone into the palace, Prince Li was the head of the imperial clan court and the emperor's younger brother, so he had certain privileges. If he wanted to enter the palace, the guards wouldn't be able to stop him. Ye Qian needed the support of the royal family and Prince Li. Li Yu had identified Dabao's small silver bracelet. For a moment, his heart sank, but he remembered the lessons he learned at the western border. He told himself that he had to calm down and not make the same mistake he had then. Trying his best to steady his breathing, he pretended to not recognize the bracelet. Without waiting for the servant's reaction, he tossed the silver bracelet back at him and ducked into a room. He ordered his guards to guard the door and immediately entered the system. A silver bracelet on its own didn't mean anything. He had other ways to confirm the children's safety. Ah, yes. In an ancient world where long-distance communication was done by shouting, he still had the system, his golden finger. Li Yu clicked on the fish children status option in the system to check on them one by one. Fortunately, he found the 4 children were all together, laughing and babbling alongside a beautiful little girl. Wangxi was silently standing to the side. That little girl. Li Yu recognized her. It was Qinghe Junju. Then he noticed the former Duke of Chang'an as well as Ye Qinghuan and his wife. The children were at the house of Chang'an. Though he didn't know why they were there, Li Yu knew that he could stop worrying if they were with the former Duke of Chang'an. It was foolish of them to try and trick him with the silver bracelet. Dabao must have lost it. After a bit, Li Yu recalled that Mu Tianxiao had once sent a confidant to sneak into Prince Xing's manor through the wet nurse, Madame Qing. Blood wasn't the only thing that was taken then. A small silver bracelet disappeared as well. It was probably the same one. The Sixth Prince was already imprisoned, so why was the bracelet taken by the Sixth Prince's confidant in the hands of the enemy linked to Lolan? It didn't make sense for them to be working together. If they were, why hadn't they stepped forward to help the Sixth Prince when he was in trouble? Why did they choose to make a move now? Li Yu felt like he was closing in on the truth. They were still trying to pressure him from outside the room, but he figuratively dug a hole for them and sprinkled some dirt on it. My apologies. I'm still waiting for His Highness to come back. I can't leave. If Daba won't stop crying, then please bring him here. He wanted to see how they would try to cover up their lie. Chapter 130. Fishy Playing Dumb. The servant obviously couldn't produce Dabao out of thin air, so he kept trying to convince Li Yu to go over there himself. Li Yu now felt even more certain that this was a trap, and so they came to a stalemate. He was quickly analyzing everything in his mind. The children were safe, and he and Prince Ding were temporarily separated in the palace. If the enemy was still attempting to trap him with a lie about Dabao, they must not be ready to expose themselves yet. They just wanted to get him to go on his own and leave Prince Ding's guards behind. Perhaps they were wary of Prince Ding's guards. Li Yu sensed that they didn't have full control of the palace yet, so they didn't dare confront Prince Ding's guards head-on and had to try to deceive him. If he'd fallen for it, he might have been captured and used to threaten Prince Ding. Was waiting the only thing he could do now? Prince Ding had gone to Qianqing Palace alone. Though he had the protagonist's halo, Li Yu was still quite worried. If he could think of a way to help Prince Ding by delivering the news to Ye Qinghuan and the others outside the palace, the former Duke of Chang'an might be able to find a way in. Even if he couldn't, it would be good to throw a wrench in the enemy's plans. But he was stuck in Qianqiu Hall, surrounded by guards. How was he going to get news out? Li Yu gave it some thought. Since the other party was trying to deceive him, he might as well take advantage of that and use the opportunity to escape. They definitely wouldn't be expecting that. As for how he'd do it, he was still pregnant with his daughter. He wasn't sure if he wanted to risk it and didn't know if it would work. User, the system chose this moment to interrupt. The main mission, sharing the country with the Tyrant, is in progress. So, the durability of your scales is doubled and is effective as protection. Please take care. The system reminded him that his stats were doubled. His scales were already hard enough normally that even smashing through the crystal bottle didn't hurt him. So, if it was doubled on top of that, he should have no problems even with his daughter. It even counted as a form of protection. No matter how often the fish scamming system tricked him, it was still quite reliable at critical moments. Li Yu couldn't let this opportunity slip by, so he decided to trust himself and the system. He confidently told the servant, I can't leave right now even though Dabao is crying, but I'm quite worried. I did bring the pet fish from the manor, and Dabao loves this fish. If you bring it to him, he might become more well-behaved. The servant didn't expect Prince Xing's consort to be so hard to persuade. Not only did he refuse to leave with him, he even asked him to deliver a fish? The prince hesitated to answer, afraid that the consort had some hidden plan. Li Yu pretended to not see his hesitation. This is His Highness's favorite fish, he added with a smile. Please be extremely careful. Prince Xing's love for raising fish was well known throughout the capital, and the servant had heard of it as well. The servant figured that having this pet fish in his hands might be useful for making Prince Xing comply later, so he nodded and agreed to deliver the fish. Li Yu said that he had to pack things up and returned to the palace room. Then, whispering to the guards, he ordered them to wait outside the door. Soon after, the door opened and, as instructed, a guard went inside. He came out with a huge crystal bottle, with a silver koi with golden scales swimming happily inside it. The guard walked over with the bottle and informed the servant that this was the fish the consort wanted to give to the young Schutze. The servant took the bottle. With a quick glance at it, he left on his own with the bottle, barring the guard from following him. Prince Ding's oldest son wasn't actually in the palace, so it was impossible to give it to Dabao, nor could he send it to Tianqing Palace. The servant decided to keep the fish for now and deal with it later. Li Yu knew the servant was definitely dishonest. There were a lot of places in the palace with water, so his initial plan was to break the crystal bottle as soon as he got closer to some water and jump in. As long as he was in water, he could swim away. What did he have to fear? So he stayed in the crystal bottle, quietly waiting for an opportunity. Suddenly, someone came over and stopped the suspicious servant. "Stop. What is that in your hand?" the person asked. "Sixth Highness," the servant greeted him. Li Yu was shocked. How could there be a Sixth Highness in the palace right now? Turning his fish body around, he swam closer to the wall of the bottle. Sure enough, he saw Mu Tianxiao's scarred, unhealed face. The Sixth Prince had once tried to assassinate the Emperor. The Emperor definitely wouldn't have forgiven the Sixth Prince, but he was now out of prison and could even wander around the palace freely. This meant that the Emperor must be under his control, and his release definitely had something to do with this mysterious force related to Lolan. No matter how unlikely Li Yu had thought it was before, it was confirmed when the Sixth Prince appeared. He stared at him nervously. What did the Sixth Prince want to do? Mu Tianxiao observed the fish in the crystal bottle for a while. "Is this Prince Xing's fish?" The servant nodded. Mu Tianxiao no longer had to play nice. "I'll bring it over," he said, smiling cruelly. He grabbed the crystal bottle, uninterested in any arguments. His icy gaze fell on Li Yu, who froze. He knew that the Sixth Prince had asked about the fish several times already. Was he suspicious of the fish? He had to pretend to be a brainless fish as fast as he could. An unintelligent fish wouldn't understand what the Sixth Prince was saying, and definitely wouldn't feel afraid. Li Yu forced himself to keep on swimming around in the crystal bottle under the Sixth Prince's intense gaze. Mu Tianxiao couldn't find anything wrong with the fish, but he thought of an idea. He started striding toward Tianqing Palace with the crystal bottle in hand. Sob, sob, sob. His fishy fate wasn't in his own hands. He had to change his plan. Meeting up with his husband was okay too. Li Yu's husband had already been sitting in Tianqing Palace for 30 minutes. He still hadn't seen the Emperor. The concubines were all there, as well as the 7th and 8th princes. There were a lot of people, but nobody said anything. They just sat in a group, staring at each other uneasily. Thanks to his cold personality, Prince Ding wasn't very close to any of them. The 8th prince walked over, eyeing him pitifully. "Fifth royal brother, can I sit next to you?" After what had happened at the hunting festival, the 8th prince felt that it was safer near Prince Ding. Prince Ding smiled slightly and nodded, letting him sit. Soon after, the 7th prince trotted over and sat next to the 8th prince. There was a noise from deeper within the hall, and a servant announced, "The Emperor is here." Prince Ding focused in, and not long after, the Emperor emerged, surrounded by a bunch of servants. Prince Ding observed carefully that the Emperor looked pale and in poor spirits. Consort Zhang was standing behind him, and behind her was noble Lady Chu. The Emperor seemed as if he was actually gravely ill. He needed help after taking just a few steps, and his breathing was labored. The Emperor quickly sat on the dragon throne, and a servant placed a cup of tea to his hand. The Emperor waved his hand irritably and didn't take it. The Emperor put it on the table in front of the Emperor and moved to the side. Not long after, Consort Zhang came over to pick up the cup of tea and personally put it next to his lips. This time, the Emperor drank some. Consort Zhang called for a handkerchief and dotingly wiped the drops of tea that fell onto the dragon robe. Chu Yanyu, noble Lady Chu, brought a soft pillow and put it behind the emperor's back. The concubines thus realized that Consort Zhang was probably above them all now, as she seemed to be enjoying the emperor's favor. Consort Zhang and the sixth prince were the ones who'd brought noble Lady Chu to the palace, so he was in cahoots with them and naturally rose in position alongside them. But the sixth prince had been thrown into prison, and Consort Zhang was usually a quail. How had the quail become the favorite? When Prince Ting saw Consort Zhang and Chu Yanyu arrive with the emperor, he realized something was wrong. The emperor saw Prince Ting too. His eyes fluttered and his lips moved. But Consort Zhang lightly smiled, and the spark in the emperor's eyes dimmed. He nodded apathetically at Prince Ting. Prince Ting noticed the slight change in the emperor's expression. He understood that the emperor was a bit wary of Consort Zhang. It was strange that she had suddenly become the favorite in the couple of days that he hadn't seen the emperor. "Qianzhi, you're here too," the emperor said. Prince Ting and the emperor had agreed privately beforehand that he couldn't reveal his muteness had been cured, so he simply silently bowed his head as he usually did. The emperor had looked startled when he saw Prince Ting, which meant he wasn't the one who'd issued the edict summoning Prince Ting here. And there were many more guards around Tianqing Palace than usual. Head eunuch Luo was still missing. Prince Ting calmly memorized the positioning of all the guards in the main hall, in case he needed to know it in the future. The emperor glanced at Consort Zhang and said to a servant nearby, "Summon the sixth prince. I have an announcement." The servant agreed verbally, but he kept looking at Consort Zhang. She smiled and said, "Even Prince Ting is here. How could we leave the Marquis of An and the Marquis of Ping out?" The Marquis of An and the Marquis of Ping had actually been summoned to the palace in advance, just as Prince Ting was, and were currently waiting in the side hall. The emperor immediately changed his mind. "All right, go summon the Marquis of An and the Marquis of Ping. I have an announcement." When the concubines heard this, they looked at each other. With the addition of the two marquises, all the princes would be there. What was the emperor's announcement? The Marquis of An and the Marquis of Ping filed in one after another. The Marquis of An's mind was still hazy, and a servant helped him to a spot slightly farther away. The Marquis of Ping had fallen out of favor for a long time, but now he was finally being summoned by the emperor. He hurriedly scampered to the foot of the throne. "Royal father, since you're feeling unwell, I'll do anything you need, through hell or high water." The Marquis of Ping would have carved out his own heart for the emperor if he could. "Tianming, go sit next to the Marquis of An." The emperor rubbed his forehead and assigned him to a farther spot as well. The Marquis of Ping saw his hope fading away again, so he obeyed, embarrassed. "Summon the sixth prince," the emperor said again. This time, Consort Zhang nodded. The servant quickly left and came back just as quickly, because he'd run into the sixth prince, who was already rushing over. When Mu Tianxiao entered, he had already changed out of the stained clothing he wore in prison. Though there were still injuries on his face, every movement he made was full of glee. As he entered, he purposefully shot Prince Ting an aggressive glance. Prince Ting's eyes met his expression unchanging as the sixth prince walked to the emperor. Mu Tianxiao didn't bother acting in front of the emperor anymore and clasped his hands together in a casual greeting. Without waiting for the emperor's permission to sit, he found a seat nearby and sat down. The emperor stared at him coldly, but didn't object. How could the sixth prince behave so wildly in front of the emperor? And why did the emperor permit it? Prince Ting had already guessed that Consort Zhang was behind it. The way she carried herself was completely different, and from the way the emperor treated her, it was clear that she was holding him hostage somehow, which meant the sixth prince was left unchecked. The other concubines present had also come to the same conclusion. They'd never seen such a scene before, and they were all too frightened to speak. "Fifth royal brother, long time no see. Why don't I give you a gift to commemorate the occasion?" The sixth prince taunted Prince Ting with a smile. Several servants came in, holding something in their hands. Even Prince Ting, who was usually calm in the face of danger, was stunned when he saw what they were carrying. The servants had brought in a crystal bottle holding a silver-colored koi speckled with gold. The fish was already wagging its tail, but after seeing Prince Ting, his tail flapped even more vigorously. "Ah, husband, I'm so glad you're all right. We finally meet again." Li Yu happily spit out a trail of bubbles. Chapter 131. Fish-Style Cooperation. A storm raged in Prince Ting's heart. He didn't know how Xiao Yu had fallen into the Six Princes' hands, but he had to get him back as soon as possible and save the Emperor. Prince Ting had already noted where the guards were stationed. He had an idea. "I know Fifth Royal Brother cares for this fish a lot and desperately wants it back, but I'm afraid it won't be so easy." Mu Tianxiao was playing with the gold chain on the crystal bottle and staring down at Prince Ting, grinning like he won. "But since you helped me when I was in prison, I'm willing to help you as well. If you're willing to go through all that I suffered in prison, I may decide to be generous and return this fish to you." The Sixth Prince beamed, as if he was touched by his own sincerity. Li Yu also heard what the Sixth Prince said, and he was furious. Unfortunately, his fins were too short for him to flip the Sixth Prince off. How dare the trashy Mu Tianxiao use him to threaten his husband? He was afraid that Prince Ting wouldn't think it through and might actually do as the Sixth Prince said. Sob, he didn't want his husband to suffer. Someone like the Sixth Prince couldn't be trusted. No, this fish had to save his husband. Li Yu pressed his fish body close to the bottom of the crystal bottle and pointed his tail at the Sixth Prince. The Emperor couldn't stand it anymore and scolded the Sixth Prince lightly. "Tianshao, it's just a fish. Why treat him like that?" "Royal father, you said yourself that it's just a fish," the Sixth Prince retorted, not even bothering to raise his head. "If Fifth Brother ignores me, what can I do? Royal father, I know that you have your favorites, but you can't bear to see him suffer even a little." The Emperor was furious with the Sixth Prince's attitude, but he was afraid of making things worse for Prince Ting, so he could only shut up. The Sixth Prince lazily glanced at Prince Ting. "Royal Fifth Brother, hurry up. If you put me in a bad mood, I might just change my mind." Prince Ting had already determined that the Emperor was being threatened by Consort Zhang, and now the Sixth Prince was threatening him with Xiao Yu. Prince Ting pursed his lips, his gaze cold, and he reached toward the hem of his robes, his knees slightly bent. This position made it look like he was going to kneel, and the Sixth Prince let out an incredibly smug exclamation of excitement. Since Prince Ting had never let him take a closer look at the fish, he opened the crystal bottle, and made to touch the fish's soft tail, deliberately trying to provoke Prince Ting. He wanted Prince Ting to personally experience what it was like for everything to be under the Sixth Prince's control. Even Prince Ting's favorite pet fish had to listen to him. He could do whatever he wanted. However, just as his fingers were about to touch the fish, things suddenly changed. The fish jumped out forcefully, smashing through the crystal bottle. As the Sixth Prince watched the fish fly out, he thought this scene seemed familiar, but it was too late. Silver light enveloped in a strong wind. Before the Sixth Prince could react, his face was firmly slapped by something as hard as iron, and he saw stars. The Sixth Prince cupped his stinging face, stunned. Prince Ting's fish had not only broken out of the crystal bottle, he realized belatedly, but it had slapped him ferociously with that harmless, soft-looking fishtail. The fish didn't stop after that slap. It kept flapping about mid-air. While the Sixth Prince was still dazed, the fish slapped him a second time at lightning speed. After two successive loud slapping sounds shook the quiet Tianxing Palace, the Sixth Prince's cheeks began to visibly swell. Everyone present heard and saw that the Sixth Prince had been slapped by a fish for some reason. Consort Zhang knit her brows, and the Emperor tried his best to keep it together so his lips wouldn't curl into a smile. The Marquis of An, who was a little farther away, saw everything as well. In his confused mind, he thought the scene seemed a bit familiar, and he clapped, laughing. "Ha ha! Good slap! Good slap!" The sixth prince was about to start cursing when he noticed a figure flashing before him. Something was wrong. When the fish broke out of the crystal bottle, Prince Sting had pulled a sharp dagger out from his boot and stabbed several nearby guards. While the sixth prince was simmering in the anger and disbelief of being slapped by a fish, Prince Sting had already put the dagger to his neck. That was how skilled Prince Sting was. He had managed to restrain the sixth prince under everyone's noses. What are you trying to do? Mu Tianxiao gulped, terrified by the cold light of the dagger. He could use chains to choke his own wife without hesitation, but when a dagger was held to his own throat, he was so scared his legs turned to jelly. But who wouldn't be afraid under such circumstances? With one hand, Prince Sting held the dagger against the sixth prince's throat, and with the other, he caught the fish mid-air with his sleeve. Li Yu knew that the emperor was being coerced and that Prince Sting needed an opportunity to strike. He also couldn't stand the thought of being touched by the sixth prince, so he decided he might as well be the one to create some unexpected chaos. Prince Sting cleaned up after him often before, so he was no stranger to Li Yu's antics. Before Li Yu broke out of the crystal bottle, he noticed Prince Sting pause slightly, as if he was planning something, so he did his best to help Prince Sting distract the sixth prince. Li Yu had spotted a thick cotton blanket on the ground, so he jumped in that direction and tried to protect his stomach. His original plan was to land on the blanket after he slapped the sixth prince. Since Prince Sting had a hidden weapon, he would definitely take advantage of this opportunity, and Li Yu could jump into the corner during the chaos and take out some of the water in his inventory. Luckily, he'd had a crystal bottle and a fish tank in his inventory this time, both filled with clean water. The crystal bottle was shattered now, but he could still bring the fish tank out. He would be safe if he stayed in there. As Li Yu expected, he and Prince Sting both had the same idea, so Prince Sting didn't waste the opportunity that he'd worked so hard to create. Not only did he restrain the sixth prince with his dagger, he even caught the fish. Li Yu was so happy that he wrapped his tail tightly around Prince Sting's finger. Though it was a critical moment, Prince Sting still took the time to gently stroke the fish's head with his thumb. Prince Sting had blocked him from view with his body and sleeve, so Li Yu quickly took the fish tank out of his inventory and jumped in. Li Yu's heart was pounding. His husband was fine, and their daughter was unharmed. Sob, sob, sob. He did it! Prince Sting, what are you trying to do? Shouted the panic-stricken sixth prince. Prince Sting's cold gaze traveled past the sixth prince to land steadily on Consort Zhang. Let royal father go, he said in a deep voice. The sixth prince was Consort Zhang's son. If Consort Zhang could hold the emperor hostage, then Prince Sting could hold the sixth prince hostage to negotiate with her. The sixth prince froze at the sound of Prince Sting's hoarse voice. He glanced at him, trembling. Wasn't Prince Sting born mute? How come he could speak? Everyone else turned pale with shock too. So Prince Sting's muteness could be cured. Tianting Palace was full of Consort Zhang's people. The other concubines were being held hostage by her as well, so they were quite happy for Prince Sting to save the emperor. They all quietly hoped that Prince Sting could succeed. The eighth prince's gaze was bright. He was still a child, so he was paying attention to something different from everyone else. While Prince Sting restrained the sixth prince, what the eighth prince saw was Prince Sting hiding a fish tank behind his sleeve. He didn't know where the fish tank had come from, but the fish that had just slapped the sixth prince must have fallen into the tank. If fifth royal brother was going to fight sixth royal brother, what about the fish? The eighth prince really wanted to help Prince Sting, so despite Concubine Lu's repeated protests, he snuck over, picked up the fish tank, and ran back. He was short, and he was just a child, so nobody stopped him. The eighth prince hugged the fish tank and wouldn't let go. Prince Sting started to see this younger brother of his in a new light. With nothing left to worry about, Prince Sting turned back to Consort Zhang and said, "Let royal father go." The dagger pressed deeper into the sixth prince's throat, and a thin line of bright red blood started to bead on his skin. The sixth prince began to scream in pain. "Mother, save me!" The sixth prince was afraid Prince Sting would actually kill him, and he hoped that Consort Zhang would come to his aid. But her expression remained dark, and she stayed silent. the sixth prince started to become uneasy. He had been taken out of prison suddenly and told that his mother, Consort Zhang, had gained power. Mu Tianxiao didn't believe it at first, but when he saw her sitting beside the emperor, despite the emperor's obvious disgust, he had believed it. This mother of his was no longer the disdained, useless, submissive woman he remembered. He didn't know when she had changed so much, but he welcomed this change. Since he was her son and she controlled the emperor, she would definitely help him take the throne. He just had to sit back and reap the benefits. But there was one thing he didn't understand. Why has she kept this hidden? And why didn't she help him when he was conspiring to seize the throne? Or had this been her plan all along? Considering that Prince Ting had defeated him and how much the emperor favored Prince Ting, the sixth prince's own plan never would have succeeded. It was only after he survived defeat, when the emperor and Prince Ting thought he was powerless and had lost completely, that Consort Zhang would take action and defeat them in one fell swoop. When he thought about it carefully, because she always pretended to be ignorant in front of him, he'd never suspected it at all. In truth, all the useful people around him had come from Consort Zhang, so it wasn't that she hadn't helped him, just that to win the war, she had to hide what she was doing from even him. These were all the reasons Mu Tianxiao could think of to convince himself to accept the current Consort Zhang. Even though he'd spent all this time trying to work her out, she never explained anything to him. Mu Tianxiao was a bit scared of this mother of his, who could even deceive the emperor, and he didn't dare ask too many questions. As long as he could be free and ascend to the throne, he decided, everything was fine. But right now, Prince Ting was using him as a hostage to threaten Consort Zhang. When she didn't respond for a long time, he started to panic. Though he still called Consort Zhang mother, he wasn't able to predict her at all. Your Highness Prince Ting, Consort Zhang, who'd been silent the whole time, suddenly chuckled. Why do you think I would make this exchange with you? You only have a prince in your hands, while I have the ruler of an empire. Consort Zhang clapped lightly, and an archer hidden in the main hall of Tianqing Palace immediately let loose an arrow. In a flash, the sixth prince was struck by that arrow. He was completely unprepared. Blood burst forth from his chest as his eyes widened, staring at his wound. This was a secret arrow, fired at his own mother's command. Mother, you... He called out to her with difficulty, then toppled over, face first. Nobody had expected Consort Zhang to kill her own son. Everyone watching sensed the danger present and shuddered in fear. The emperor couldn't believe it. Not even tigers harm their own children. Why did you kill Tian Xiao? Even though the sixth prince had made an attempt on his life, the emperor had never wanted to kill him. But Consort Zhang had easily removed him from the equation so she wouldn't be burdened with him anymore. The emperor knew he couldn't compare to her cold-hearted viciousness. Not even tigers harm their own children. Consort Zhang laughed. That was just a single life. When you destroyed Lolan, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. Surely that makes you a lot worse than a tiger, The emperor looked... I knew it. The emperor looked back at her with a fierce glare. Prince Ting frowned slightly. You're from Lolan. Consort Mei? That's right. Consort Zhang admitted it easily. She had been hiding for almost half her life, but there was no need for her to hide anymore. She reached up and wiped her hand across her face, pulling off a thin layer of skin. Consort Zhang had started as a maidservant, with a slightly darker complexion and features that made her look honest and sincere. But when she took off the layer of skin, her skin was pale and her appearance exquisite, completely different from the way she'd looked as Consort Zhang. I am Consort Mei, she said, but I've never liked that title. I am the daughter of the ruler of Lolan. You can call me Princess Lang Ya. Li Yu had hypothesized with Prince Ting that whoever poisoned Prince Ting when he was born and kept trying to assassinate him might be related to Lolan or Consort Mei. But as it turned out, the supposedly dead Consort Mei wasn't dead at all. She was the one in charge of the poisoning and assassination attempts. She had been hiding in the palace all these years as the Sixth Prince's mother, in a guise almost as transparent as glass. Her entire life must have been leading up to this moment, the moment she could exact her revenge on the Emperor. Then, how did Consort Mei, Princess Langya, turn into Consort Zhang? All right, everyone, I think that is a good stopping point, and okay, haven't the tables turned to a direction I was not expecting at all? Okay, so I only have a couple of things to say. And I'm going to start at the top of my list. So the first thing that I was going to say is when I was reading, and the very first time that they requested to go see the Emperor and the Emperor refused them, I was like, okay, I feel like that's suspicious. And now we know why. Oh my God. So anyway, the other thing that I wanted to applaud Li Yu, because instead of panicking and going with this servant, he remembered he had his baby monitors via the system and used a good moment to get away from that servant and actually view his babies to make sure they were okay. Very, very proud of him. Also, as soon as he was in the prince's grasp and the prince was, saying what he was saying to Prince Jing, I was like, sir, have you not learned it? Have you not learned via other people's experiences, secondhand experience? Because he'd clearly, I remember from whichever book it was, the second one, I think, when it said that he definitely saw Li Yu jump out of the bottle and do something. It was like, okay, when the whole monk situation happened, you should have seen a Fishy slappy coming. That's, whatever. It is what it is. And then the other thing, I guess we'll get more information as we continue reading, but I'm going to just vent right now, and maybe it's something different, but I don't think so. Noble Lady Chu Yanyu, you know how to mess up a good positioning for yourself, because if you're with Consort Zhang and you're totally cool with all of this, and if you're from Lolan as well, I don't know, whatever the case may be, you had yourself set up good entering the palace with the Emperor, which now I guess I understand why he didn't help the Sixth Prince. Anyway, you're about to lose all of that, sir. And you're not a prince. So if you end up dead, that's on you. Like, I felt bad for you at one point, but I'ma just say that I don't feel bad for you at all. But again, let's wait until we get more details. Let's see. I hope you all enjoyed these chapters. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section, and I will see you all next time. Wo einnehmen.